Hi everyone, I'm Jane from the Business of Food. I started Australia's first kitchen incubator 12 years ago in 2008, and the whole reason behind that was to actually provide a compliance space for people to trial their new food products and get them up and running. At that time, there weren't a lot of co-working spaces and there weren't a lot of shared kitchen spaces around. So what I built was something that, we could actually use to explore any new food products and any get it to a scale-up situation where you could then move into your own space and continue your food business journey. So over those 12 years, we've actually had a lot of interesting adventures and a lot of the industry changing around us. At the moment, we are kitchenless, which didn't really make sense for the name My Other Kitchen. So we had a name change about 2.5 years ago called the Business of Food. We realised that the value that we were offering people was actually in the knowledge transfer. So the connections that we made with experts in their fields and the people that we met along the way that were just as interested in food and just as interested in the food industry and wanted to help with their services like graphic design, like website development, like packaging experts, and like people in export. So tonight, 3 of those people are actually going to talk to us about a common problem, or a lot of the questions that I get asked is, once I've started up and I've moved into my own space, where to from then? And I think that's a really valid question. And I want to introduce 3 people to you tonight. Najib Lawand is from Export Connect. Founder, Najib?
Yes, founder, correct.
Since what year?
2017. So it'll be almost 3 years old. It'll be 3 years old next month.
Perfect. And then we've got Tatiana from Granny. I've gone back to the old name, Tatiana. She now runs Granny's Food.
Just recently, about a year ago.
I know. And how long have you been running now?
About 5 years.
I think it's about 5 years.
Yeah,
time flies, right?
Yeah.
And Tatiana, do you want to tell people what you make?
We manufacture in the dumplings. We started from the Russian style dumplings, and then we extended to the all other Eastern European, like Polish, Ukrainian, and now we manufacture in the Afghanian and Japanese dumplings as well.
Oh, nice. And you can see some of those examples behind you, right?
Yep.
Lovely. And then we've got Anna Plotkin from ForTrade Lawyers. And I think that name kind of describes itself, right, Anna?
That's the aim.
You don't have a specialty, do you? You're quite a generalist in business.
Yes, that's right. I'm a journalist, but I love export and I love food.
Yeah, great. Thank you. So thank you all for joining us. I mean, obviously, you've got a great skill set there to be able to help people when they do want to get into export. And I think we might start with Najib. Is that okay with you, Najib?
Sure.
Great. Can you describe to me one of your typical customers?
Oh. I don't know if we have a typical customer. We've been fortunate in the 3 years that we've been running that we've delivered over 120 projects for more than 55 food clients, 85 clients in total when we include government agencies, industry associations, and other service providers. So of the 55 food businesses that we've done work for, we've done work for Woolworths, Master Foods, Simplot, Chobani, all pretty big companies, through to medium-sized companies like Melrose Health, More Life, through to small companies like Spice & Co. and Love Some. So our typical, the challenges that we are typically asked to come in and help solve around market selection. So which are the best markets for them to play in? Around market entry strategies. Should they be selling direct to retailers, distributors, e-commerce channels, and the like? We are typically asked to develop their pitch documents specifically for the markets that they're looking to enter. So, many of these producers have acknowledged the fact that when they go overseas, they take their Australian pitch document with them. So they're presenting to a Singaporean how they would to an Australian. And so they've asked us to help them adapt that to have better success in international markets. We help them in terms of their activation program. So what kind of, how to promote a product in that international market. And then, of course, given 25 years in food and agribusiness export across Asia and the Middle East, I have all my buyer networks. So we introduce them to pre-qualified buyers to get some business. So these are the key areas where we find our customers want help in. But yeah, we don't actually have a typical customer per se.
Yeah, it sounds like a great variety, from very large to quite small and growing. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. We do, and the fun thing for us is, we've done over 200 market assessments, and for more than 20 markets. So we've got some clients that just want to look at Singapore, Hong Kong, and Dubai because they're they have to import everything that they eat, and they have a diverse market to sell product to, like in terms of market segmentation, and they have a propensity to spend, through to customers who've been asking us about the UK, who've been asking us about Taiwan. We've recently started helping Singaporean companies sell their product into Australia.
Oh, fantastic! So you go both ways.
We can. I don't promote the Australian bit because I'm still only 3 years old, right? So and our business has grown organically. So we don't have any loans. We survive off our consulting fees, and so we can support companies within Australia, but we don't promote that because we're just not resourced to do it.
Of course, yeah, of course. Am I right in thinking that Export Connect also does that background research? I mean, you mentioned some of it, but I'm sure you've got a lot of that research already done, right?
Yeah, that's right. So that's the core to everything that we do, because whenever we introduce suppliers to buyers, whenever we develop pitch documents, everything that we present is evidence-based. So, we don't, for example, say, look, here's this manufacturer in Australia that makes an amazing sauce and you should buy it. We go to them and say, okay, the condiments category in Hong Kong is growing at 7% and forecast to grow another 6% in the next 5 years. The trends are that consumers in Hong Kong are looking to cook more at home, and so they're looking for different flavor profiles, and in particular they have an interest in native Australian ingredients. And here we have a supplier that uses kakadu plum, and I'm just making this up, right?
Yeah.
And when we look at who the competitors are in the market, they will be priced accordingly. So we use the information that we research to then make the pitch absolutely evidence-based. So when the buyer sits there and has a look at it, typically what happens now is people send just their basic PDF and their website, and they're like, okay, that's nice, but should I buy it? Should I be interested? How are you different? You know, blah, blah, blah. So we put all of that in the pitch document so that the buyer, at the end of the pitch document, which would only end up being less than 10 slides, is certain about whether they want to pursue this product or not.
Okay. Sorry, I'm just going to mute Dean for a minute. That's really interesting, but it seems like you've got a lot of information on the countries and the categories and the markets, and then on the other hand, you've got all these producers that are looking to get their products into those categories and into those markets. Do the producers generally come to you, or do you go out and find those producers to fill those gaps?
So I've been very fortunate. You know, knock on wood, I don't want to jinx myself, especially in this current climate, but we've not done any business development work at all. So all our clients have come to us. And we have had buyers come to us and say, we're looking for such and such a product. Do you know someone?
Yep.
And so we do that as a favor to the buyer, but that's not actually our service. Our service is working with companies that have a genuine interest in export, whether it's for them to start or whether it's for them to expand and grow. So obviously, you know, Simplot and Master Foods and, you know, these guys, they're wanting to grow. They want to be better at export. But then for some of the other clients, you know, they want to get into it. And so on the odd occasion, we do get inquiries from manufacturers, producers that are completely new to export, and so we talk them through the basics. Yes. And we don't actually do the work for them because they discover very quickly that they're not ready. So we ask them, for example, why are you thinking about export? What is it? Is it a diversification thing? Are you looking for a quick sale? Do you want to travel? Is it because the Victorian government is taking a stand at FHA Singapore and it's free and you want to just make use of it? Like, why actually are you exporting? Then we ask them, okay, so have you set a vision and a goal for your export? Do you want it to be 50% of your turnover in the next 5 years? Do you want it to be 10% of your turnover? Do you want to be in 3 markets overseas? And why do you want to be in those, you know, markets? Do you have the resourcing to get into export? So I mean, you know, most exports for small businesses and startups are run by the owner, the founder. But the founder also does the accounts, and the founder also makes the goods, and the founder also orders the packaging, and the founder also drives in their ute down to the airport to pick up their ingredients. So you know, do you have the resourcing and the financial capacity to do it? So it's you know, before we even talk to them about whether do they understand the unique selling proposition in that market, we try and understand, are they doing it for the right reasons?
Yeah. We had this conversation the other day, just very briefly, and I think as consultants, a lot of us work in the same kind of way, in that, you know, we get a lot of inquiries from people that maybe aren't quite ready yet, but they need to know how they're not ready and how they can fill those gaps and then come back to us, right?
Yeah. So you know, I have had one client. So they manufacture sort of mueslis and oats, breakfast oats, based out of South Australia. And they came to me a year and a half ago, and they understood after that conversation, actually after 3 conversations, that they're not ready. And just before, you know, the whole COVID-19 thing happened, they said that they're ready. So now, you know, so then of course they went into sort of survival mode, and you know, and they're sort of now at sustaining mode, which is good. So now they're looking at sustaining their business, and I think it won't be long before they'll start getting into the growth mode, and we'll do the work for them. So that's an example of a company that actually took on board what we said, took the necessary steps. the timing is right, and so now they want to go.
Right. Okay. So maybe this is a good time to move on to Tatiana, because some of the points that you made about, you know, the founders being everything from bottle washer to delivery person to production, I think fits really well with what Tatiana's going through right at the moment, right, Tatiana?
Yeah, pretty much everything what Najib said was about me.
Fantastic. Do you want to tell the people what you told me this afternoon, that you're in production and, you know, that feels like your life right at the minute?
Yeah, well, we started our business from Jane's My Other Kitchen. We didn't actually start it as a business, it was mom's hobby, so we just thought we we're gonna rent a kitchen for a little bit to spend a bit of time to do something together with mom. And that's what it was all about. So we didn't really think about it that seriously. So pretty much what's happened, it's happened because of Jane. Because
I'm not sure about that.
Girls, you will need your own factory soon. We said, no, Jane, it's just a hobby. So it just, yeah, we're not gonna go as a business. She said, no, girls, you don't understand. You will need a factory soon. And we've been with you for half a year, maybe a little bit longer, yeah, before we purchased the factory.
Not much longer. You were there very, very short. It was for a very short time.
Yeah, well, one day when I was delivering the dumplings to the Russian grocery shop, I've met one distributor and he said, how much you've got now in your freezer? I said, well, about 50 kilos. He said, I'll take it all and I'll come back next week to pick up another 50. And that's how it's all started. So we started making more and more and more, and we couldn't fit in Jane's kitchen anymore. So we quickly went to have a look how they're doing it in Russia, in Japan, in Malaysia. We visited a few factories before we decided what we will purchase, what kind of equipment, and how we want to set up the factory. Within a couple of months, we've been lucky. We found a very small, tiny place in Dandenong South, which was another good luck. So the Dandenong Council is pretty good. Helen Bickman was very helpful with everything, and yeah, so we were quite happy with this little place. It's becoming a little bit tight now, but we managed to find a way. So we using it when we are really busy. We're using it like a double shifts.
Wow.
Using a separate storage. So we have another partner now so we do contract manufacturing for him. So we're using his facility to store the product, and he's also export registered, so we can store our export range in his factory as well.
Right, okay. And that's a point that we might touch on a little bit later as well, because obviously there's a whole lot of considerations from a production and storage point of view that you need to think about when it's a totally different market with different regulations and, you know, more stringent, I imagine, kind of ways of working, yeah? Right. So you've been going for 5 years now and you're exporting, right?
We start from New Zealand, which is really like you sort of, it is an export because you still need some export documentation, but not a big deal. So New Zealand is much easier than everything else. At least you don't need to have a meat export license for New Zealand because we can trade between two countries easily. So New Zealand, we've been exporting for about 2-3 years now. And it's doing okay. So it's not a big country, so it's not a big export. So, but it's pretty stable. Then we thought, well, we want to try. So we started from Singapore, as Najib said that we took a space with the big government stand. So we thought we were gonna try because we were not sure whether the product is suitable for overseas. So we thought we'll try the export. If we have a lot of success, we'll start applying for the meat export license, because meat export license costs a lot of money, and I didn't want to do this exercise. Like it's nearly, well, with editing all the cost up, it's nearly $20,000 a year. So I didn't really want to spend that money before knowing whether the product is going to be suitable for overseas.
Yeah, right. But so,
yeah.
Can you just tell the people what percentage of your fillings are meat and vegetables? Because you've got a range, haven't you?
Yes, we do have a vegetarian range. And what was my mistake? I should have started selling the vegetarian range first before applying for the meat, before introducing the meat ones. But probably because of my background, I do need meat. Like in Russia, everyone eats meat, so without meat, it's not a dish.
The meat ones are the first ones. The meat, sorry, Tatiana. Keep going.
Buy it without meat. So, and actually, it's actually was the Singaporean distributors said that as well. They said, like, if it's just a vegetable one, we can easily import it from Russia, Belarus, Ukraine, everywhere, and it's cheap. But not many people have the meat license. So once you do the meat one, we'll be ready to buy. So that's why I start doing that. But yeah, it took me about a year, a bit more than a year.
It took you about a year to get from negotiations to selling, or it took you a year to get your license?
Meat license. Right. The property premises to be approved and registrations and everything, the trainings and stuff like that. So I didn't realize it's going to be that. But because I was trying to fit it between the productions and everything else, so it took me a year.
Of course, as Najib said, you know, most founders who start out bootstrapping and then suddenly find themselves with a business, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So you've been going 5 years. You're exporting to New Zealand and Singapore. Is that it?
New Zealand, Singapore, and we start in Indonesia. Indonesia, we start supplying the Australian embassy. They don't have their own supermarket in Jakarta, so we were supplying that. Bit less than a year, I think.
Okay, well done. That's some huge milestones in 5 years. Do you? I'm just curious now. Do you look back and see what you've done and are really proud of it? Because I think you should be.
Well, I do look back and I think, like, yes, we do much more now, but still, I think that I could have done better.
That's always the way, right? Yeah. So you've raised a couple of points there around, you know, the order that you do things in, and actually, you know, where you think you could have done better, whether you could have or not. So I think we might actually pull Anna in at this point and have a discussion about how you see that working, Anna, because you must see that a lot. You know, people get themselves into situations and then don't know where to turn. Would that be correct?
That's right. I see people actually even before they get themselves into situations in a kind of paralysis, because there is so much information out there. Lots of people happy to take your money to get you overseas, and it's the wrong time. So I've spoken to someone who had a beautiful agreement. He said she had a beautiful agreement, cost $10,000, and she had no customer. So that's the sort of thing that can break your business at home that would otherwise be successful.
Yeah, you're always on the back foot then trying to catch up, right?
That's right. Yeah. So one of the first things that I would do before going into it is actually looking at your business, the way you hold your assets here, to make sure that if something does go wrong like that overseas, you're not bringing down your company here, or you've got some level of protection.
Right. So what are some of the other things that, from a legal perspective, that you think a producer should be looking at? I mean, obviously, when they go to Najib or, you know, someone like Najib, they're going to get a lot of advice and guidance from them about, you know, how it works and what they need to do next and what they need in place to get to that point. But there must be a whole heap of, I don't know, agreements, IP, that kind of stuff behind that you need to think about as well.
A whole heap of stuff. I try and simplify it because otherwise it's too frightening. And the way that I look at it is if you break up your supply chain, and if you were to write down a timeline with every point along the supply chain and look at who you're dealing with to get from A to B, what would happen if something happened at each point, and try and work out some elements of how you would deal with it, so that, and I give clients a list of the kinds of topics that they need to think about as well. So when you go and speak to, say, a distributor, you basically got things you've already thought about. You don't have to have an agreement, but you're prepared. You can have a proper discussion, and you can start off on the right foot, not have to renegotiate something you've already thought you'd negotiate.
Right. Okay. So is it true that every customer would be a little different, or do you think there's a checklist that you can basically give anyone looking to go to export?
Yes and yes. So because you're always right. So everyone has their own concerns, and everyone has a different appetite for risk. Someone might have a different level of borrowing or assets behind them, or loan history or something like that. So we bring a lot of baggage, but we also bring our personality. And so everyone's different. Every product is different. Every market is different. So everything has a different interplay. So when we look at, say, I don't know, choose a contract with a distributor, we might think about, well, if it's a refrigerated product, who's going to be responsible? Sorry, I'm too quiet now. I'm not sure where my microphone is. Is that any louder?
It's actually fine for me,
Right,
but
for you?
yeah. But if you could speak up, that'd be great. It just fades in and out now and again, Anna. But I think that's bandwidth as well, right?
Yeah. I can't turn anything else up, I don't think.
Okay.
Okay. No, I don't know where I was. We're talking about risk appetite and
you were talking about how the product makes a difference. So whether it's a chilled product or those kind of considerations, I suppose, when you're talking about a distributor. Yeah.
Yeah. So when we look at different elements, like whether it needs to be refrigerated, therefore, how does that reflect in the contract for that client? Does it need to deal with freight differently? Does it need to deal with product recalls differently at the other end? Especially if you don't know that there's a problem because it's just a degree off in refrigeration or something. It changes shelf life. It might throw you off there. So little things can have an effect on what kind of contract you want and what kind of result you want, and what kind of dispute resolution you want.
Right. So we might go back to Najib, I think, if that's all right. Najib, sorry, we've just unmuted you twice. How do you handle all that law stuff behind it? Because I don't know, do you have a lawyer in the team, or do you just know
look,
what kind of problems?
When it comes to distributor contracts, we've, so I've been 25 years in food and agribusiness export, either representing other people's brands, selling my own brand, creating platforms for New South Wales Trade and Investment, and then, of course, my time at FIAL creating the market development program. So just to add to Anna's pointers, I'm very much a market development kind of person, and so in the contract, because I do my homework, I would list there which are the retailers that I want them to be in, which are the channels that I want them to be in, when do I want them in by. I set a whole bunch of KPIs in place. So because the distributors are going to be very keen to set KPIs on us on providing promotional funding and support, and fulfilling 70% or plus on their order requirements, and shelf life, and so they're going to put all sorts of stuff on us.
Yes.
So I put all sorts of stuff on them, and then that's and it basically is my buyer selection criteria converted into the contract. So these are the types of things I do. Now, when you talk about IP protection, I don't do that myself. No, we'd go to the specialist for that. I'm not a lawyer. I just so there are some things that you can't do yourself. You do need that legal help. In terms of distributor agreements and things like that, exclusivities. When you've done it enough, and if you've done it in Australia, then you sort of can do it internationally. You can set the parameters and be fairly comfortable. And so when we advise our clients, they come to us because our service is all around market development. They don't come to us to negotiate distributor agreements for them, because that's not what we can, but that's not what we do.
No, but it sounds like you've got a stable of buyers that, or maybe you've got some contacts with buyers overseas that you prefer to work with because they understand the nature of give and take, and you've already got some previous working relationship with them. Is that correct?
That's right. They're I only introduce my clients to buyers that I've pre-qualified. By pre-qualify, it means I've either worked with them, like I've actually marketed products through them. I've gone to them, but they haven't taken the product for whatever reason. But I know their background and I know they're strong. So, like for example, I'm doing some work for Simplot with the Legos brand. And the best distributor for them in the UAE, hands down, in my opinion, is Choithrams. But they already have Kimball, so they've already got to pass the source. So they would love to take it, but they would have to can a relationship they've had with another business for 25 years, which they're not going to do.
Yeah, no, of course.
So yeah, I work with companies that I know have a good payment record, that maybe they've been the distributor for San Remo, or they've been the distributor for Roma Foods, and and they've been their distributors for over a decade. So I know, these kinds of companies are not going to keep dealing with distributors in market if they're not solvent.
Of course.
So yeah, and then there is that cultural element as well. So they're familiar with Australia and Australians and Australian product. They're familiar with the logistics, either challenges or opportunities, depending on which part of the world it is. Many of them in Asia, for example, in particular Southeast Asia, they have their own freight forwarders that they like us to work with. So, you'd think a lot of exporters are required to provide a CIF price, but for some of these distributors, they actually only want you to deliver it to the port, and they'll take care of it from there. Some of them, and this is important for some of your, sort of followers, because they're in the startup stage, they're niche and they're small volumes. Some distributors in, say, Singapore and Malaysia, they actually have their own consolidation set up in Australia, where because people typically understand consolidations to be sold to retail chains, but in fact there are some distributors who also consolidate, and then they sell to retail chains. So there'll be some amazing product that has all these unique attributes, but they can only sell 4 or 5 pallets at a time per month.
Right. So can I
aggregate that?
Can I just get you to describe to us what consolidate means? Because I think it means they take smaller volumes from lots of different places and then on sell. Yeah.
That's right, correct. So it stems from the fact that that for retailers, they want the minimum number of vendors to deal with, right? So they just want to raise one purchase order and have one supplier for whatever product it is that they're buying. Yeah. And for many of the supermarket chains, say in Southeast Asia and also the Middle East, they don't want to compete on price. So they want to compete on differentiated product in their stores. The challenge with that for them is that differentiated product usually means it's going to be niche. And if they're going to deal with lots of small suppliers and small quantities, it's not going to happen. So they go to a consolidator, aggregator, exporter, whatever they get called, and so they then say, "Can I please have 2 pallets of these chocolates, 1 pallet of this, functional food, 3 pallets of these, and here's up 1 purchase order, and so you consolidator, you raise 1 invoice on me, I pay 1 invoice, beautiful." Consolidator then takes these and goes, "Okay, I now have to raise 12 separate orders myself with all these individual suppliers, who then they will deliver their small quantities to the consolidator." And usually, most of them are actually based in Melbourne, so this is very lucky for the Victorian setup. And so they deliver it to the consolidator, who then does any additional labeling work or whatever it is, maybe that it requires to get into the market. They pack it and then they ship it. So the consolidator raises 12 purchase orders. Each supplier raises 1 invoice. So the consolidator picks up their margin based on basically handling the order. Now, the good consolidators will then also act as a marketer, and so they will propose to the buyer some new products from Australia that they may not have known about. And then the better consolidators actually have people on the ground in those markets and actually merchandise the Australian products that they're representing. So consolidators can have varying degrees of usefulness. Usually there's a stigma around consolidators, but they're necessary. Now, typically they operated for the retail chains, but I'm seeing more and more consolidators, distributors in Southeast Asia actually consolidating product as well, or distribution.
Oh, that's very interesting. As an incubator, we often see a lot of trends coming through. And in the last probably 1.5 years, almost 2 years, we've seen a lot of those trends come together. Normally we can pick 1 or 2 in a year and we can say, oh, this is the baby food year, or this is the granola year, or this is, whatever. But in the last 2 years, we've seen a lot of different trends come together. Are we following other countries with those trends? I see a direct correlation sometimes. For example, we had a keto snack food go straight to Amazon and sell in America. But they're kind of, they're very young, so they're trying to get traction in kind of both countries, but America is obviously the bigger market and the easier one to get into for them. How do you kind of pick that? Because I can't imagine that the trends all over the world follow the same kind of trajectory. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. So the trends. So because there are a lot of expats that live in the Asian and Middle East markets. If we say let's focus on those because they're the closest ones to Australia, but they are familiar with this, right? But when you look at a lot of the trends, you'll see that the US is a little bit ahead of Australia in the trends, and Australia is ahead of Asia in the trends. So you do see the trends You do see the trends that we operate with here in Asia, but they are a little bit behind us. But having said that, the expats are aware, and it's just the locals getting to understand it. But if I can share, I think when you're looking at trends, if you've got someone listening in that is like, oh, look, I don't know what to make, but I want to make something. Yeah. If they make it that it's all natural, that it uses native Australian ingredients or has a provenance, aspect to it. Yeah. If it's packed conveniently, for convenience and snacking, is functional. Yeah. And packaged to the right size for the market. Yeah. And longer shelf life. It's really easy. If you can make that, and priced well,
there you go.
Then that's the ultimate. So then you start, obviously, if you can get all of that together in the one package, come talk to me and I'll help you.
Perfect.
Otherwise, you just start peeling back. Okay, so we can offer all of this, but it's a frozen product. So
yes.
Okay, so then you're right. Okay, so the market changes a little bit, but at least you've got those other points, which is something that they're looking for.
Right.
The other way you find differentiation from your competitors is by having a defined activation program. So most, North American, European, and Australian companies, they'll go and they'll take a product and say, here it is, and here's the price, take it or leave it. If you want to have a point of difference, you go and you say, okay, this is what's happening in Malaysia. This is how we fill that gap. This is how we're unique, and this is our provenance story and whatever. And here is our promotional program. This is the kind of social media things we can do. This is the kind of in-store promotions we can do. This is the kind of point-of-sale material we can offer. Right? So a distributor and a retailer will look at that and go, wow, okay, already this company is 10 steps ahead of the South African product, the British product, the Italian product, and the Canadian product that I'm looking at in the same category, because I've only got this much space on my shelf and I've got to choose between one of these brands to sell. Well, these guys are coming with a full solution, not just from a product and packaging perspective, but from a promotional angle as well. Very important part of the pitch.
Yeah, but that makes it a lot harder for a younger business to get into, even a consolidator, I imagine, yeah?
Consolidators are so consolidators, they're basically, it's trading more than marketing. So the consolidators will never pitch the promotional story. Because it's too much work for them.
Oh, okay, fine. Oh, good, I've learnt something. So we might actually go to Tatiana, because I imagine, Tatiana, how did you pick the countries that you wanted to go to? Was it just convenience for New Zealand, and then Singapore you went with the government trade mission?
Yes, New Zealand came by itself, so I didn't really do anything. So we were exhibiting in a fine food. And that's where we met the distributor, but he already had a little bit of a homework before he came to our stand. So he sort of done a little bit of research about what he wanted to buy. So he was actually looking for dumplings, and he read about a few companies. So he chose our product. He chose two actually for the beginning, and eventually our one that was the one who survived on the market. Lucky, because our product is, as Najib said, natural, packed conveniently, has a good price, and has a long shelf life. The only disadvantage is that it's frozen. So very difficult to do the LCL, the consolidation.
Yes.
We had a few buyers who were very interesting, but they wanted small amounts, and the consolidator who they were working with, they said, we don't have anything else to consolidate in frozen goods. So we can't really consolidate the frozen meat product together with something else. So we only deal with, for example, Singapore for the frozen stuff, but we can't do it to Japan for frozen. So it was a few things like that. So frozen product is a little bit of a little bit harder than a shelf stable one.
Yeah.
So
Because I imagine there's not a lot of variety then, because you've got to pick something that's similar, has the similar conditions, has the similar packaging, and that then doesn't give you a variety of products, right?
Yep. Usually when companies are processing meat and they decide to export, they only do they doing it when they're really big. So they don't start exporting like me from very small. And that's when they start exporting, they already have a bigger customers and a bigger volume and things like that. So it's easier for them to go by themselves. They don't need to go through the consolidators.
Yeah.
But we get in there.
What made you choose to go to export?
I just wanted to grow. I was using it anyway, like, and I thought, because it's so hard to get the meat license for the processed meat, because it's too much hassle. Not many companies going through this hassle. So I thought maybe we can get, maybe it will be easier to find the buyer overseas.
Right. Okay. You couldn't find the market in Australia?
Now thinking that I just didn't do it right, because now it's getting much better, and I just I have a very poor marketing skills. I don't know, when I was growing up, they didn't teach us how to say, well, buy my product because this is good, and this is good because of such and such and such. They will teach us, if it's good, people will come to you, which is not happening. So you need to promote your product, you need to do the marketing, and it's which are just simply not able to do. I can't really write the comments on the Facebook, the ads on the Facebook about my product.
It's funny when you're so close to it. It's often really hard to know what your customers are looking for. I mean, I know you can talk to them, and you can validate those kind of things through sales, and you can see where your sales are going really well. But when you dive right down into it, it's really hard to take yourself out of your shoes and put yourself into their shoes and understand their thinking and what it is they want. But you told me the other day that you were actually following some of those trends, right?
You mean the vegan one, the meat-free?
Yeah.
We started doing the meat-free dumplings. We had one custom. Where did we start it actually? It was the exhibition, and there was a big presentation about the mock-up meats.
Yes.
So we thought maybe it will be a good idea to try to put it in dumplings, because we tried it in a burger, and Victor was so hungry and tired after the all day working, so he didn't even realize that it was not the real meat. I said, like, what did you eat now? He said, just some cheap burger. I said, well, not. It was actually a very expensive one because it had soy meat. So we thought we'll try to make it in the dumplings. And at the same time, we had a customer who came to us, and he wanted to do he wanted us to manufacture it for them. So we started doing that, and we actually took that to Gulf Food, to Dubai. Yeah. And it was quite a good success there. So now it's sort of slowed down because it was a project for the MCG and all those big events. So it's sort of on hold. We still do sell it a little bit, but not as much as we were thinking of. It was a big boom, but then it just slowed down. But it still sells. It still sells. It's still going well, and product was actually quite tasty, surprisingly. I like my meat, but I was quite surprised that it was quite nice.
Yeah, we've had we've had some companies come through the kitchen in the last couple of years, and our very first vegan customer, the client, was making meals in 2015, but I think he was a little ahead of his time, because it's taken us 5 years to kind of catch up to that and see it on shelves. And in the last year, we've had 2 or 3 people come with ideas for vegan meals. So take-home meals has always been a popular category, and it seems like there's a never-ending appetite for that. But fake meat, yeah, has been a really interesting trajectory, I think.
And I think after the COVID now, it's going to be even bigger, because people will start thinking that, oh, if you wouldn't eat cows that was bitten by the bat and things like that, there would be no way to transfer diseases, and the vegan and vegetarian people will be even, this market will be growing even more after this pandemic.
Interesting. So maybe Anna, have you got anything to add to this discussion?
On trends? No, I don't think so.
Okay. But what do you think people should be looking for? Sorry. Excuse me.
In terms of
the path that they follow to get overseas, when should they actually start considering things like IP?
So IP depends in part on where you're going. So if you're going, to keep it really simple, if you're talking about trademarks and branding, there's 2 basic ways that they're protected in different countries. One is first used and the other is first registered. So in China, it's first registered, so you don't go anywhere near it unless it's registered. So you'll do that really early, and others you might hold back because you might want to change your branding, you might want to change your name or the look or something, and there's no point protecting something you're not going to use. So you've really got to not put the cart before the horse.
Yeah, and I think that's a discussion we have a lot. A lot of people come with no idea of how to protect, when they should be doing their trademark or when they should be protecting their processes if they've got a unique process. And it's kind of hard to know, because in the beginning you don't have a market to protect. In the beginning you're just trying to, get your feet underneath you to push off. But you still need a brand and you still need to use those processes. So is there a perfect time to start protecting that stuff? Is it at the beginning?
I think there's basic things that you need to do for 2 reasons. One is registering a trademark is not expensive, and it's a good, strong way to enforce your rights. But it still relies on you actually putting your hand in your pocket and doing that. It sends a message that you know what you're doing. So that's a really important thing. And the other thing that people don't know is often is that registration in Australia is not going to protect you anywhere else. It's per country, and there's ways of making that easier. So the other ways of protecting your IP, one is confidentiality and non-use agreements. Again, it's more about making people think about it, making people realise it, and making people understand that you know what you're doing. Except again, you have to enforce them if you're going to go down that path. So the other way is looking at your supply chain, looking at what's really of value, and seeing how else you can protect it. And sometimes that's about hiving off part of it and keeping that in Australia, or sending your own personnel overseas if that's where you have production there. otherwise, it's about something practical, like talking about security measures that you can use. And there's a whole raft of those kinds of things to avoid, say, substitution of beautiful wine for horrible wine.
Yeah. Right. And I think there's some of the stories that you hear about, suddenly when you start trading overseas, you kind of lose that connection with it, I'm supposing. And, other people are privy to what, you would normally protect quite easily in Australia. When you're close to it, when you can control who has that information, right?
That's right. But at some point you have to seek control. And sometimes it means maybe doing something special for a country. If you think the risk is too big for you to take on, you might use elements of your brand and reputation and tweak something so that it makes it easier to cut the arm off if something.
Right. Okay. We might start wrapping it up now, Jib, but do you want to have the last say on, is there something that we haven't touched on that you want to cover while you have us?
Look, I think it's important, for Tatiana, the idea to go to export markets was a growth strategy. It capitalised on the support that was available through the Victorian government, and there was a lot of trial and error there. And I mean, she's the first to share that there was a lot of pain along with the joy. You say, looking back, is she proud of herself? Certainly, she should be proud of herself. So I think for anyone that's looking to go overseas, do you have to sell far and wide in Australia before you go internationally? No. Is it wise to do that? Yes. But sometimes it's wiser to go overseas. The brand that I represented, or that I created, Real Energy Bars, I created that for the Asia market specifically and sold in Australia second. So I went overseas and then sold here.
Yeah, right.
I think it's just important when you think about export and whether you should get into it or not. It's a journey. You have to think about it from a marketing perspective and not a trading perspective. I think this is where Australia falls short in the food and agribusiness space. We've got such a long culture of trading our products, and that just doesn't cut it in international markets. You have to go in with the marketing mentality. So why is the product good for that market? What is your pitch to the buyers, to the trade, and the consumers? How are you going? Okay, so you've got people interested in putting your product on their shelves, or they're bringing it up on their screens as they're looking for products to buy through e-commerce platforms. What are the reasons for them to actually buy it? So getting it listed is one thing. Selling it and getting it moving off the shelves is another. So you have to really think about all of these. You don't have to have the entire solution before you go. There is room for trial and error. People are going to make mistakes. I mean, Export Connect is a consultancy and advisory service. I've never done that before. So I've given advice, but never charged for it. And I make minimum one mistake a day. But I plan, and I research, and I do, and I learn. And export is exactly the same method. You have a vision, you have a plan, set your tactics, you do it. You don't sit and watch, wait. You do it, and you get better at it. And it's just the way it is. And just know that there is help out there. So you've got the Victorian government, some of the local councils. So I think Tatiana also spoke about Helen Berkman's there from Dandenong.
Yeah.
Export Connect. You've got yourself. There are a lot of people out there that can provide support either free or for fees. Either way, it's going to help you de-risk your journey
Yes.
to export success.
Yeah. Now I know that you used to run workshops, didn't you? Do you still do that?
So we used to run them a lot face to face, but the social gathering restrictions put a halt to that. In fact, that represented 25% of our revenue was
Great.
workshop.
Yeah.
20% of our revenue were our market visit programs, where we take small groups of companies overseas to market. We prepare them, we develop their pitch, we travel with them and introduce them to buyers in market. So 45% of our revenue, in an instant was wiped. But fortunate for us, we had lots of projects we were already working on, so that's kept us going. So we are going to be at the end of this month running an export masterclass online for members of the Gippsland Food and Fibre Gippsland.
Oh, nice.
And then the first week of June, we're going to be running an export masterclass for members of Food and Agribusiness Network up in the Sunshine Coast. And from my learnings across those two, I'm going to be creating online export masterclasses that will be available for anyone to set in and learn. So I am going to be doing that. And then once the social gathering sort of setup is, restrictions are lifted, which it sounds like, Australians have behaved well, and so that might happen, sooner rather than later. We'll do face to face as well, because a big part of the appreciation for the workshops in the feedback that we get from the participants is the networking.
Yes.
And it's very difficult to network now.
I know. When you can't even have, normally we're in a room where there's like 20 people talking at once and all these connections being made. And, I think moving it online opens it up to a lot more people, but actually changes the whole format of it. And we found exactly the same thing. I was halfway through 2 programs when this hit, and suddenly they had to go online just to be finished. And that was a learning curve that was going through the roof for everyone, I think, but opens up a whole heap of opportunity.
I mean, right now we could be talking about all of this eating Tatiana's dumplings.
Yes. In fact, she said, didn't you, Tatiana, say that if we were going to be meeting in person, you were going to be doing the catering? She's probably talking. Tatiana?
Yeah, definitely we can do that. With my pleasure.
All right, we'll book you in for the next one.
Wonderful.
Tatiana, while I have you, is there any last things you want to say, any last pieces of advice that you want to give to people that might be listening and considering going to export?
Well, as Najib said that he's making a mistake every day, one mistake a day. I guess there are only people who doesn't make mistakes is the people who are doing nothing.
Exactly.
I don't know, it did work for me. Even I didn't do much research before I've done it, before I start doing it. It's still working okay. So I'm still happy that I've done it. I can't say that it was a big journey, it was a lot of things, but I'm still happy with what I'm doing. I think that Australian people sometimes forgetting what they have here. When you're taking our product overseas, you really start to be proud of what we've got here. Because when you try what is like, really our vegetable and our meat is a great meat and veggies. So we do have a great produce. When I'm going overseas and presenting my product and I'm trying some other stuff which is similar, I'm getting a little bit more confidence in what we're doing here, what we have here. And people who live overseas, they do appreciate Australian product. So I think we do have a good sales point to sell our Australian product overseas.
Great, that's really good to know. So knowing that, where would you like to be in next? Which country would you like to trade in next?
Japan and Middle East.
Fantastic. Well, who knows? Najib might be able to make that happen.
Can I just add as well?
Sure.
I'm fairly confident post-COVID, and Australia has only been enhanced by how well, I mean, I talk about, we've behaved well and we might have social gatherings soon, but actually internationally, when you look at our main competitors, which is North America and Europe, their response to COVID has been abysmal, and it conjures images of safety, hygiene, so we already had an amazing reputation globally. Our reputation globally will only be enhanced when it comes to tourism, when it comes to other things, and when it comes to food. So I actually think, in a twisted way, this is worked to our favor, and this is an opportunity to capitalize on our great reputation. As Tatiana says, we're known for our quality and our natural qualities, and COVID is only going to amplify that.
Yeah, that's really encouraging.
If I would be an investor during this time, so I would look at the countries. If I would have money to invest, I would have a look at which country is doing and how they're doing and how they're handling and how the government is handling the situation, and I would invest the money in that countries and in the product from those countries. If it's a long-term relationship, then I think yes, Najib is right.
I think it's an interesting point you make, Tatiana, about, we don't know how good we've got it here. I think we have nothing to compare it to. And so sometimes, it feels a little substandard or a little, slapdash or whatever. But actually, it's encouraging to know that, to have that confirmed that, we have great produce, we have some producers making fantastic stuff, and we can actually then access markets overseas. Anna, have you got any last pieces of advice for people considering going to export?
Yeah, thank you. Look, I think export is great for a whole raft of reasons, but one of the big ones is that when you get exposed to different products and all the different elements, ways of doing business, people and cultures, and you have all the challenges that you face when you're overseas. When you come back here and you're working on your domestic business, not in it, but on it, then you bring all of that experience, and you can cross-fertilize between countries. You can think of different things that could happen, and so different things that you might do in your business to enhance it, and you end up with a stronger business here. Not just because you're growing, and not just because the profits are good because you're overseas. And capitalising on brand Australia.
Yeah, good point. Good point. Well, thank you, Najib. Thank you, Tatiana. Thank you, Anna, for spending time with us. Hopefully we can bring a taste of success to you again in 3 months. If you've got any topics that you particularly want to hear about, then I'm happy to pull that panel together to talk about that problem or that challenge or, that particular subject. So just let me know. If you've got any questions, I might actually be able to send you through all the details of Najib from Export Connect, Anna from ForTrade Lawyers, and can I include you, Tatiana, or are you too busy in production?
Oh, sure. You can use my phone number the way you wish.
And she may or may not answer, depending on where she is in the factory at the time.
No, with the phone, I'm pretty good, I think. I'm very bad with emails, but yeah, phones, I'm usually answering pretty good.
Okay, thank you for sharing your stories with us. I'll just,
Okay.
you're welcome. I'll
Thanks,
stop that
Jamie.
recording.